It's been 30 years. 30 years of saying yes to the passion that God has placed on the inside of me to lead. You see, it's a journey of leading others to find their God-given purpose. And because of that, you have this feeling on the inside of you that it's our leadership responsibility to do everything within our power to help other people succeed their God-given purpose. Snow, pipes, and what I learned about myself this week. I remember when a pastor mentor of mine said that you find out what's inside of a person when they are thrown up against the wall. Well, this week's podcast is a bit of transparency about how I handled the chaos of minus 7-degree weather, 20 inches of snow, and being without power and water on the mountain. So come on in, right? This is one of those podcasts where you get to see how unpolished and still growing I am. So I've been reading in Exodus with our family through the Bible in a year, right? That plan that is on Bible.com or YouVersion, depending on which version you have. So as a leader, I really love to teach on the leadership principles that I have found in Exodus chapter 18. Although this time around, it hit me a lot different. In Exodus chapter 18, verse 5, it says that Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife unto Moses in the wilderness, where he had encamped at the mount of God. And he said unto Moses, I, thy father-in-law Jethro, am come unto thee, and thy wife and her 2 sons with her. And Moses went out to meet his father-in-law. Well, they met, and Moses tells his father-in-law all about what's happened from Pharaoh to Israel fleeing to the wilderness to the fire, pretty much everything. And then verse 9, Jethro rejoices for all of that goodness. And then Jethro sacrifices to the Lord. Now that's pretty significant because if you remember previously in the interactions with Moses, we can assume that Jethro really had a lot to do with idolatry. But let's go to verse 13. It says this. It says, it came to pass on the morrow, this is after all of that happened with Moses and Jethro, that Moses sat down to judge the people. And the people stood by Moses from morning until evening. And here's the part that I love, because it stood out to me this time in a really big way. Again, let's set the stage here. Moses has been gone for years. Jethro is an idolatry worshiper just turned to God. And then there's this conversation that takes place with Moses and Jethro. Jethro sacrifices to God. And now we're at the next day. And Moses' father-in-law, who hasn't led the nation out of Egypt, who hasn't suffered through the plagues or any of the persecution, hasn't been chased by the armies of Pharaoh, hasn't had to leave in the middle of the night, he comes and watches Moses, and he says this in verse 14. He says, and when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he did to the people, his father-in-law said to Moses, what is this thing that thou doest to the people? Why sittest thou thyself alone, and all the people stand by thee from morning until even? And Moses goes on to this explanation that no one else can do it, and how he has to hear from God for leading the people. And verse 15 says that Moses said to his father-in-law, because the people come unto me to inquire of God. For when they have a matter, they come unto me, and I judge between one another, and I do make them know the statutes of God and his laws. Now, I can imagine Jethro kind of sitting there listening and like shaking his head like, no? Because this is what his father-in-law says to him, right? In verse 17, it says, the thing that thou doest is not good, and thou shalt surely wear away both you and this people that is with thee. For this thing is too heavy for thee, and thou art not able to perform it thyself alone. And then he goes into this long discussions on how to do it. Like this is a true business consultation happening right in front of our eyes from verse 19, 20, 21. Let's skip down to verse 22. And we get to hear one of the biggest reasons why. He says this, let them judge the people of all seasons, and it shall be that every great matter shall bring unto thee, but every small matter they shall judge. So it will be easier for thyself, and so they will bear the burden with thee. If thou shalt do this thing and God commands thee so, then thou shalt be able to endure. Wow. He's saying if you do this and God tells you to do this, listen to those two things. If you do this and God tells you to do this, then you shall be able to endure, and all these people shall go to their place in peace. And then here's the kicker, verse 24. So Moses hearkened to the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he had said. Now, I've always taught this message as Moses delegating to people, not holding on to everything, not being the only one with the answers, not thinking that only he can do it, not saying that he can do it because nobody else can do it like he can. Like, that was the thing I used to teach out of this. Delegation, delegation, delegation. And that's a great thing to learn. But this time when I read it, I had to ask myself, am I humble enough to be willing to learn from those around me? From my family, from people who are friends of mine, from, quote, father-in-laws, from my friends, from my own kids. Can I get counsel from those around me that maybe aren't my trusted source? Now, before you go into the defensive posture that we should all have wise counsel and not be unequally yoked, and that those who are not Christians should not be able to speak into our life, I have to say that I agree, because I started that argument myself. But when I started diving into this more, and I started reading the passages that are in Psalms about wise counsel, this is what it says. Like Psalms 11:14 says, where there's no guidance, the people fall, but there is abundance. But in abundance of counselors, there is victory. Proverbs 12:15. I was about to say something else about that, and I thought, let's just skip on. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man is he who listens to counsel. Proverbs 20:18 says, prepare plans by consultation and make war by wise guidance. So then what do we do? How can we just be subject to anybody giving us advice? How do we also move ourselves into a place of humility? How can I balance these two things? How can I not just let anybody speak to me, but let anybody speak to me? Well, let me share this in the story. So in our struggles of the ice storm of 2021, along with 20 inches of snow on the mountain, all the pipes freezing, well, not all the pipes freezing and fixing pipes and losing some power and all of that. Anyways, I'm finding that I have some work to do on me. See, on Sunday, we were heading out, about to go to church, and the bus, we have a big bus. We have one of those white, like, airport buses as our personal vehicle. And we're driving up our hill, and if you've not been on the mountain, it's a good steep. So we're at the top of the mountain, but it actually goes higher up in the mountain, then comes back down to our property a little bit. So we're going up that steep incline, and it's covered in snow, and the bus is literally sliding off the mountain. It's getting off this road is not really a good idea. And so the second time we're stuck, we're shoveling, and one of my children says to me, Dad, get the 4x4 forward and let's push the bus up instead of us trying to do all this shoveling. I ignored her, and I accused her of being more worried about getting to a party than working together. Now, why is that? Why am I talking about a party? Because I said we're going to church. Well, the kids really wanted to go to church, but they also couldn't stand the idea of missing out on a good friend of theirs who was having a birthday party afterwards. And so I was being a little snide and not a very good dad, right? I mean, wow, my flesh was struggling. So let me explain this. See, I was carrying all the hard work of all the gifts and all that they had created and all the excitement about being back at church because we missed the week before, and to be with friends, and to be honest, maybe just to leave our property for the first time in 9 days. And I was carrying this guilt and the weight of potentially disappointing them, that if we can't get up this daggum hill, then they're going to be upset and sad. And now I know what's silliest in me to think that I would the whole world has to revolve around me. This is my plight. This is my battle, and this is what I'm very transparent about. Because what is more silly is that I was treating them like they weren't part of the solution. More silly than me thinking that they're going to be disappointed in me, I took it to this far extreme. Not one of them had a bad attitude. In fact, every time the bus would start moving, and this happened 4 times, where we start moving and then we slide off to the left, they would start cheering. And I'm like, oh, like at one point, the 4th time we were stuck, I said, well, I'm going to go get the 4x4 forward and I'm going to push the bus. And on my walk back down to the camp, I was praying and I was asking God, why am I acting like this? This is not how I want to act. Why am I carrying this weight? This is not a weight I'm supposed to carry. And it was simple. I had no humility because of a fear of rejection. Now, if you ask me, and I've won that battle before, I thought I was over that. I mean, it's my kids. They actually think I'm pretty cool. Like they actually like me as a dad, but my worth was being wrapped up in not disappointing them or anyone for that matter. And I prayed in the Spirit, and once that revelation hit me, it got to me before I got to the truck, and I got in the 4x4. My spirit was uplifted. I apologized. I was back to being fun, loving, joyous dad that I want to be. I know it doesn't sound very fun, loving, joyous the way I said that. I say that because I'm assuming I eventually got back to that. I might have still had to press through a few things. I got into the 4x4. I told Neely to press the gas on the bus just enough to put pressure on the tires. And we got the 4x4 truck right up against the back bumper, and it was like butter. It was so easy to move the bus. So what do I learn from this story, and what are we learning from this passage in the Word of God? Well, let me give you the first one. Number 1 is this: humility will save you time and energy. The beautiful thing I notice about Moses and Jethro is that Jethro, who's not had any position in Moses' life over many years, shows up, speaks something to Moses, and Moses listens. How powerful is that? To have the humility to listen to somebody that didn't go through any of the junk that you just went through. That in our pride, most of the time, we're like, how would they have anything to say? They've not been through what I've been through. But when we take the time to listen to those who are wanting to give us wise counsel, not only will we get things done quicker or better, but I think we become better versions of ourselves. In fact, I love what it says in verse 22 of Jethro talking to Moses. He says this: so that it will be easier for yourself and so that they can bear the burden with thee. Pushing that bus up the hill, I was trying to carry the burden by myself. My kids were out there shoveling. They were out there thinking of better ideas. What if we did this? What if we did that? They were doing the exact thing that they were designed to do, yet their leader was stuck in a place of trying to carry the weight by himself and couldn't even hear them. Yeah, bad dad move, right? Well, this is the reality of who it is that you're listening to. But I know sometimes we freak out about this. Like, what? We're allowing people to come in our lives and help us through words, through ideas, through actions. What if they're bad people? What if it's bad words? What if it's bad actions? Well, that brings me to point number 2. See, wise counsel was less about the person and more about the counsel. See, when I read those passages in Proverbs, I always turned the word counsel into counselors. And whenever the scripture says counselors, which it only says twice, it's saying wise counsel as a person. All the other times, it's literally just giving reference to the counsel as being wise, not the person giving it as being wise. Now, I'm not saying that you should not surround yourself with awesome, wise counsel people. I'm also not saying that you need to surround yourself with ungodly people. Absolutely not. But what I am saying is that if God can use a donkey to speak, then he could probably use the people that you are around that maybe you don't fully agree with how they live or what they believe in or how they may say it. And actually, it's probably the third one more than anything else. You may not agree with how they say it, but it doesn't change point number 2, that wise counsel is more about the counsel and less about the person. Our job is to judge the counsel given as much as we want to judge the person giving it. I mean, I'm going to go back here. I'm sliding up through the scriptures because there was something phenomenal about what he said, and I caught it, honestly, for the first time. Y'all can hear our rooster down there doing it when I was just reading it during this podcast. So then let's go slide back up to verse 23 because this is powerful what he says here. This is Jethro talking to Moses. He says, if thou shalt do this thing, in other words, if you'll listen to this counsel that I'm giving you, and God command thee so. So here's the whole point about point number 2 is listen and then see if it's God's command. And it's going to take point number 1 of realizing that humility is going to save you time and energy. But point number 2 is simply like receive it and then find out if it's what God is trying to tell you to do. That's what Jethro tells Moses in verse 23. That's what we're saying in point number 2, right? And again, I'm not saying to surround yourself with ungodly people. I'm just saying that when advice comes, when someone speaks something to you, immediately judge it by the word, not by your feelings, not by your emotions, not by how you feel, not whether it's offensive, not whether it makes your pride rise up. And I'm speaking to myself when I say this. All right, point number 3 is this. Do what good counsel says to do. What I mean there is actually do it. Listen and try it out. When the Spirit tells you, hey, you need to listen to this, then listen to it and do it. Like, listen to this. If I would have listened to my daughter when she said, hey, Dad, go get the 4x4, go drive it up here, let's push the bus up to the top, I would have cut off our time by 75%. Instead of it taking 40 minutes to get up a 200-foot piece of road, it would have taken us about 10 minutes. But instead, my pride, my carrying the weight, my being responsible, all these other lovely words that really don't mean much, cost us an extra 30 minutes. See, we wouldn't have gotten stuck 3 more times, and we would have had a lot more peace as a family, and I could have learned something without being rude. Because isn't leadership really about continually growing? I mean, Moses, after all the growth that he had as a leader, leading a nation of 2 million people, and that's a big deal, guys, bigger than anyone else I know in leadership. After all of that, to have the humility to listen to his father-in-law and to apply it to how he was leading, I think that is true leadership. To be humble enough to want to learn, even if it comes from a donkey. Because that's what leadership is about. It's about being one step ahead. It means that every day you strive to be at least one step ahead, at least one experience in front of those that you have been given the gift of leading. It's not a matter of being the best. It's not a badge, and it's not about being the brightest person in the room. It's simply about having the courage to lead. It takes commitment, it takes persistence, it takes patience, but above all, it takes an everyday God experience. I'm Benjamin Stewart. Until next time, go lead from the edge. If you enjoy these podcasts and want to show support, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, or Parler at Leading From The Edge. If you want to connect about leadership, family camps, or business coaching, you can email me, ben@benjaminstewart.org. Be blessed, behave, and go lead.